Hey, Stewart's Chapel. This is Don Pierson and Don Counts. And these next two devotions, I'm just going to stay with Luke. I just want to summarize what we have learned and add a little bit more about how we can become a house of prayer, the things we can learn. We've read through all four Gospels of the cleansing of the temple. I'm going to read Luke's again. We're going to start with verse 45 of chapter 19, and then I'm going to give you 8 points. Some of those you've already heard, some you haven't, over the last few days. Then Jesus went into the temple, began to drive out those who bought and sold in it, saying to them, "It is written, my house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." And when he was teaching daily in the temple, but the chief priests, the scribes, and the leaders of the people sought to destroy him, and were unable to do anything, for all the people were very attentive to hear him. So here are my thoughts. Some of these I've already shared with you. I'm going to just summarize and put them all together. Some of my thoughts about what is needed for you and I to become a place, a house of prayer. One, the first thing is pretty obvious in Scripture. God expects His place of worship to be a house of prayer. He expects it to be a house of prayer. He could have called it a house of praise. He could have called it a house of worship. He could have called it His house. He could have called it anything. But repeatedly, He called it a house of prayer. He expects that. And until you and I expect it to be a house of prayer, there won't be much prayer in His house. The second thing that we can take away, He always describes it as His house. It's not mine. It's not Stewart's Chapel. It's not whatever name you have on your sign. It's not your pastor's house. It's not your house. It's His. You and I are just guests. It's His house. Third thing, He calls it a house. A house is a place where you can come and rest. It's a place of life. It's a place of family. It's a place of intimacy. It's a refuge. It's a place of safety from the storms. It's a house more than it is a temple. Your place of worship, a house. Fourth thing, it's not a priority or an emphasis on prayer that makes it a house of prayer. It is the priority. Let me state that again. It's not a priority or an emphasis. It is the priority. It's the house of prayer. It's not just something you and I do. It's not something we do every now and then on special events. It's not one of many priorities. It is the priority. Because you see, the emphasis on the house of prayer means that it's a place where God's people talk and visit with God. That's the priority. Fifth thing, a house of prayer is made up of people of prayer. A house of prayer is made up of people of prayer. The sixth thing, don't forget what I shared with you earlier, the 2 4s, F-O-R, the 2 4, and how you emphasize them. You will not become a house of prayer for all people until you become a house of prayer that prays for all people. Let me say that again. You will not become a house of prayer for all people until you become a house of prayer that prays for all people. Seventh thing, we have not really talked about this up until this point. They had made it a den, a cave of darkness instead of a house of light. Houses have light for a reason, so people can see. They have made it a den, or literally a cave, a dark place when it should have been a place of light. And the eighth thing, they not only made it into a cave, a dark place, they filled that dark place with thieves. The thieves are not the ones you're thinking about. The thieves aren't just the money changers. I have come to realize that you can be very, very strong in making sure and having policies that you don't sell anything in the house of God and still have a house of God filled with thieves. Every time someone comes looking for a visitation of God and we, the people of God, stand in their way in the house of God, then we have robbed someone of what they should have been able to receive in His house. So how are you doing? Tomorrow, we will talk about the 3 types of churches in relationship to prayer. Love you, Stewart Chapel.